In connection with the attack on the United States, the Lord told his prophet there would be an attempt to overthrow the country by destroying the Constitution. Joseph Smith predicted that the time would come when the Constitution would hang, as it were, by a thread. And at that time, this people will step forth and save it from the threatened destruction. It is my conviction that the elders of Israel, widely spread over the nation, will at that crucial time successfully rally the righteous of our country and provide the necessary balance of strength to save the institutions of constitutional government. Now is the time for us to get ready.
Welcome to the Nauvoo Legion podcast.
What's up? Welcome everybody to another episode of Nauvoo Legion. Super excited. We have a pretty awesome guest today, Gaby or Gabriela. She's from Cuba, and so she has personally experienced communism and or socialism, whatever you want to call it. They're very much interrelated. So we're gonna have a great discussion about that, and how that affects us today, why it matters. And so, yeah, introduce yourself.
Yeah, hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining and listening. I am originally from Cuba, and I'm very excited to start answering questions and maybe incentivize you to think a little bit more about what's going on in America.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, she's lived it and seen what communism's actually like. And, being that we just had Mom Donnie in New York, who is a self-proclaimed socialist, right? I thought it would be really cool to have somebody who's actually lived in a country, right, that could tell us about what it's really like. So, I guess first, like, how would you define communism?
Well, in communism, there's supposedly no state, and everybody is supposed to be the owners of everything. So there's no private property, no private schools, right? No institutions. Everything belongs to the people. That's in theory. In reality, it's very different.
Yeah. Yeah, and the reality is completely different, I think. To what it's supposed to be, this great magical thing where everybody is taken care of and has everything they need. But when you actually come to the practical application of it, it seems to have the opposite effect.
Yeah, and the thing is that for communism to actually exist, like the theory that Marx established, everybody have to think the same way. So everybody needs to agree that yes, they want to give all their belongings to be shared with everybody. And so that's actually impossible. You cannot make everybody, a whole country, think the same way. So the only way for communism to happen is to have a state. You cannot have a stateless country where everybody thinks the same way, they agree on everything, and they want to give up their belongings or their properties. So once you have a state that is forcing people to give away their stuff, that is a dictatorship. And that's the only way that communism can exist.
Yeah, it's the only way that it actually works in reality,
Exactly.
right?
Very
Yeah, exactly. That's a theory. And so, that's been something that's been on my mind a lot over the last couple years. We had in 2024, during the presidential campaign, we had Kamala Harris, who her running mate, Tim Walz, said, there's a quote from him where he says, that socialism is basically good, and one man's socialism is another man's, I forget the exact phrase that he uses, but he says one man's socialism is another man's neighborliness. So he compares socialism to being a good neighbor and being good. And so, as we look at but I guess the question is, I first want to define what socialism is. So there's a great book that I've been reading a little bit. It's by Ezra Taft Benson. It's called The Red Carpet, Socialism, the Royal Road to Communism. And so Ezra Taft Benson, he was I believe, the 12th U.S. Secretary of Agriculture under President Eisenhower from 1953 to 1961. So he spent 8 years in the White House. as one of the advisors to the US president. And then later on, after that, and during this time, he had already been ordained an apostle of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So he kind of put that on pause, went and served as the US Secretary of Agriculture. And then later on in the 80s, he became the president of the church, right? So he's very influential, and this is what he says about socialism. So what is socialism? And this is how he defines it. When socialism is understood, we will realize that many programs advocated, and some of those already adopted in the United States, fall clearly within the category of socialism. What is socialism? It is simply governmental ownership and management of the essential means for production and distribution of goods. So that's what socialism is. And I think there's a lot of ways in which we're already seeing it implemented in the United States with, like, if you look at Obamacare, healthcare, now we have pretty much complete control of the government over our healthcare. And there's a lot of other things. I don't know, what things have you kind of seen?
Well, first of all, I want to make sure that everybody that's listening understands that socialism is the road to communism. Not because I say it, that's what Marx said, who is the creator of this theory. And it's actually their purpose. That's why in Cuba, when I say, oh, I lived under communism, people say that's not true. You didn't live under communism. And what they mean by that is that I lived under a socialist revolution that was supposed to lead to communism. But like I said, of course, communism always ends in a dictatorship. So once you are on the road of socialism towards communism, that's where the country stays. There is no further step after that. It's a dictatorship. And yes, I've seen a lot of resemblance with what I lived in Cuba here in America. Like you said, Obamacare, many programs. And I kind of agree that it's okay to have some kind of welfare, but I believe more in charity and the willingness of people to give to others, the freedom that they have to choose whether they want to give or not. I don't agree that we should force anybody to give to others. And yeah, and I don't know,
Yeah.
were you asking about a program in specific or?
Yeah, just more specifically, and I agree with you. I think that like welfare is not bad, but when you have state-controlled welfare, whenever the state or the government controls something, they're always doing it under the threat of violence, right? Because if the police pulls you over and you resist, what happens? There's the threat of violence, right? So that's what all of our laws are based on. When you get to the bottom of it, that's what it's based upon, is the threat of violence. And so we shouldn't be threatened with violence if we don't want to give all of our money to the government, be taxed by the government, and have everything controlled by them. I mean, yeah. And so I guess my question was more so, what are some of the ways in which you have seen since you've been in the United States, like that we have socialism, or that we've implemented it here?
Well, there's definitely a political movement, an ideologic movement here in America. We have several political parties that have the same ideology as the one used in my country, and just student movements and so on. So, for example, right here in Utah, we have the Party for Socialism and Liberation. They actually send young Utahns to to Cuba every year to
Mm.
be indoctrinated by the Cuban regime. They
Oh,
go to
wow.
conferences there, and many people don't know this, they do this in every state. It's not just Utah. They have a branch of the Party for Socialism and Liberation in every state. And here in Utah, we think of communism and socialism are not a threat to our freedoms in the state specifically, but we have these movements and parties right here in our state, in the capital of our state, in Salt Lake City. We also have armed queers who actually recently deleted their social media accounts after Charlie Kirk's death. And I have been trying to expose these groups for a while, but nobody ever takes me serious because they think it's not an actual threat, that there are more important issues. And that's the problem, that socialism and communism are the root cause of so many problems that we have in America. It's the Marxist ideology, where both socialism and communism come from. That's the root cause of many of our problems. The way we are thinking and the way we're teaching our kids and our youth to think that everybody should give to others, that you have the power to force others, um, that we are all victims, that we are something else than just Americans, because for some reason, being an American is not enough. You have to be something else to identify with in order to be someone, to be important, and to have a meaning in your life. And that all comes from Marxism, and it's ruining our culture or the American culture, which I take as mine as well now. It's ruining our government, it's ruining our state. So I think it's
Yeah.
very important to pay attention to these groups.
Yeah, and I think people don't realize that. I just saw that there was a group in Utah promoting socialism. Let's see, it was called, I'm trying to find
The
it here.
Democratic Socialists.
Yeah, I think the Democratic Socialists. So in Ogden, I have a here, and later on I'll go and add it so everybody can see it.
Yeah.
Um, Socialist Night. What is socialism? November 23rd, I saw this. It's going to be held, or it was held in Ogden, and they're doing this at a school, Socialist Night.
Yeah.
So this is starting to happen. It's like starting to spread. It's already here. And I think what you said is more important. Like some of the ideas have already spread, like the ideas that Marx had, that one of the things he wanted to do was destroy the family unit. And if we look, we have all of these movements, and many of them are Marxist movements. Like if you look, so Black Lives Matter, for example, that's actually a Marxist organization,
Yeah.
right? And what did they do? They went and did all these riots and did all these things. Even if we look back at our history in the United States during the civil rights movement, a lot of the leaders were Marxists, right? Martin Luther King Jr., his Stanley Levison was a Jewish Marxist, and he was one of the ones that was wrote a lot of the speeches and things. And what they do is they say things subtly in a way that sounds really nice and really good, but then so that you don't notice what their actual true agenda is, right?
Yeah.
Which is to rush in the social, they want to bring socialism, so they want the government to start taking more and more power so that eventually they can get communism where there's complete government ownership of everything. It's this authoritarianism, this top-down control. They talk about being progressive, but it's really regressive because what they're wanting is a king, basic. It leads to someone like Fidel Castro who comes in and is the king that controls and decides everything, and everyone else is poor except for a few people at the top.
Yeah. And regardless, I mean, in regards to that, I have personally been to a meeting of the Party for Socialism and Liberation in Salt Lake City. And that one meeting that I attended, it was about three of them, so three young youths that went to Cuba for 9 days. And they were sharing their experiences and trying to spread the indoctrination that they gain in Cuba to the rest of the attendees. For them, the experience in Cuba was amazing. But one of the things that shocked me the most was how they agree with the dictatorship in Cuba. They
Mm.
said, yes, this is necessary in order for everybody to be equal. So they understand that there is a lack of democracy in Cuba and that this is not freedom. But at the same time, they think it's necessary for communism to happen. So if they believe that and they call themselves the Party for Socialism and Liberation, I don't think we need to go to college to understand what all of this is about. Same with the socialist demo. What is it called? The last one you said that they're having
The
the
Democratic Socialists?
democratic socialist. I have a lot of friends that say, no, they're not Marxists, they're not communists. Yes, they are, even though they don't call themselves that. If you look in their website, they themselves say it that they base their ideology on Marxist ideology. In one of the night schools that they had, I think it was last year or 2 years ago, they were teaching Marxist theory. It was on
Mm.
their flyers. This is not something I'm just making up. I'm not paranoid about it. It's on their website. It's just that they're never going to come up to you and say, yes, I'm a Marxist, yes, I want communism, because that is going to scare people off. And they don't
Yeah.
want to see anybody.
And I think one of the things that people don't under, one of the problems is most people don't have never studied communism. They don't understand how it happens and how it works in actual practical application. During when the Soviet Union was around, they people always talk about the Holocaust in Germany, but they never talk about, and that's a whole other topic I could get into another day, which I will. But they never talk about what happened in the Soviet Union when 30 to 60 million mostly Orthodox Christians were murdered in the gulags and how their churches were burned down, priests and nuns were beaten, and those were a lot of the people that were killed. And so that's what the entire revolution did was it I think an important element is it removes God, and in place of God it puts the government. It puts this tyrannical system that's supposedly going to come in and fix all the the problems and the inequalities that exist. But it really, and all it does is make everybody poor. It just makes everyone poor across the board except for the few elite people at the top. And so I think if people would go back and study the Soviet Union and what happened, then maybe they and also as well as how fast it spread, because it was like that. It spread incredibly fast, right? And many of the countries in Europe at the end of World War II, right, what happened to us, we allied with communism. The United States allied with the Soviets. So when we went and we defeated the Germans, half of Germany lived under communism, and the other half lived under a free enterprise system. And and many other countries in Eastern Europe had to live under those same conditions until the end of the Soviet Union. And so I think a big problem with what we see now is people just haven't studied history. And so they're wanting these things that cause lots of death and destruction, and they don't understand it.
And it's important to add, I think, that the wall was built by the communists, not by the
Yeah.
free enterprise part. So they were trying to keep people away from escaping communism. If communism is so great, why do you have to build a wall for people not to escape? And I have to say something else as well. There is nobody more evil than a communist. Communists are so, so evil. They don't believe, they don't have compassion for others. They love to say that they love everybody, that they want equality for everybody, but in reality, they have no compassion. They will kill, they would hurt, they will do anything they need to do for their ideology to succeed. They really don't care about other human beings.
Yeah, they have no compassion. They use compassion as a way to justify what they do when in reality they have none themselves.
They're not
So
tolerant.
they're not tolerant of anything that's not communism. So I
Mhm.
did want to ask you about that. Now kind of we've established like what is communism, what's kind of and socialism, what's the threat to us. I mean, we talked about Mamdani in New York, the guy who just won the mayoral election in New York City, the one of the biggest cities in the United States of America, and he's a self-proclaimed socialist. So if you don't think this is a threat, this is what's coming, right? And so yeah, I just want to now I kind of want to go, but like since being you've lived in in a communistic society, you know, what was your experience like? How did you escape it? And then we'll kind of go into maybe a little bit more on Cuba.
I think the best way to describe it is Plato's allegory of the cave. And City of Amber, I don't know if anybody has read that book or seen the movie, but that's an excellent way to describe it. While you are in Cuba, you don't know anything else about the outside world, especially when I was living there because they started getting some internet in 2018, few years after I left. But while I was there,
So you didn't have access to like the internet until like
no.
2018.
No.
Wow. Wow.
I didn't know anything about the outside world
Wow.
except for some rumors. You had some people that have family members outside and they talk about what life was like. Sometimes my dad used to pirate some movies or videos from the news here in the US. And we kind of got an idea, of what life was like outside. But growing up, since you're very young at school, they teach you that the US is an enemy, that imperialism, that America is going to invade Cuba, kill everybody, that people in America are starving, that kids have to work in order to eat. And so pretty much that Cuba is the best country in the world and everybody else is a mess. There are wars, guns, violence everywhere in the world, but Cuba is perfect. That's what they show you in the news. That's what they teach you at school. You cannot think different, first of all, because you don't have a resource of something that would start an idea in your brain. When you don't know about something, you just don't think about it. It's very hard to
Yeah.
explain.
Yeah, so it sounds like basically the government controls like all the information. They tell you what to think, what how to be
Yes.
educated. That's wow,
Yeah, because
wow, that's
remember, we don't have private property in Cuba. So all the institutions, schools, hospital, everything belongs to the government. They say to the people, but it actually belongs to the government. Um, and so they control everything, everything from your way of thinking to what you're gonna do for a career, for example. After you finish high school, they give you a list of a few careers that you can pick from. If you wanted to be a nurse, but your school didn't get the nurse category in the list, you cannot be a nurse. Things like that. And you don't understand how bad these kind of things are until you leave and you know something else. You can only imagine that I don't know, me as a teenager or as a kid, I always had the hope because I listened to my parents saying, we're gonna leave Cuba one day, we will be free, and we will have this and this. I had an idea of living better, having water all the time or electricity all the time, no power outages, those kind of stuff, or eating ice cream every time I wanted to. But when I left, that's when I really understood how bad we had it,
hmm,
how bad it was. And to this day, I don't understand how so many human beings can live their whole lives and die under that kind of systems with no hope for something better. Like my family in the countryside, they don't even dream of leaving Cuba. They think that they really believe that they're good where they are. And if they leave Cuba, they're gonna get killed. When we told them, hey, we're gonna leave Cuba, they said, aren't you scared they're gonna kill you?
hmm,
And I'm like, I'm scared they're gonna kill me here. Because there's
yeah.
so much violence in Cuba and they don't want to talk about it. They think that not having any guns will eliminate violence. That's not true. We have a lot of violence in Cuba, even though nobody owns guns. It is illegal. So yeah, growing up, it was just lack of food, lack of everything you need. I always like to mention a very specific example, no toilet paper anywhere. So it's just inconvenience after inconvenience, and you just get used to living like that. Every year it gets worse, and you adjust to it.
Hmm,
You don't even think about, oh, maybe I can go to the streets and protest. No, because first of all, you don't understand that you have that right as a human being. And second, you know that if you do it, if you talk, if you speak even to a neighbor, you can get arrested and you can go to jail. So you better just shut up and adjust to the new inconvenience.
wow. So just really just a lot just really poor. Nobody has, you know, it sounds like living in a society that I mean, now that you've been in the United States and seeing how free we are and how much prosperity, how much extra like we
Yes,
have, like
definitely.
maybe just people over there because they don't see it, there's that, like you said, that wall that's intentionally put up to keep people from having a free thought, from thinking for themselves.
Like being here in America, you see rich people everywhere. Maybe your neighbor is rich and you see nice cars and nice houses and you can dream about it and you can set the goal of, oh, one day I want to have this car or one day I'm going to buy this house. But in Cuba, because you never ever see richness around you, you don't have any ambition for something better. You cannot improve yourself. And if you ever have a dream, your only dream is leaving Cuba. There's no way to fix it.
Mm. Do you think Cuba will ever be free?
I think it's gonna take a long time because nobody's gonna come to help us. Only the Cubans can fix their country. And for that is needed a lot of courage and a lot of organization and
Mm.
and strategies. And Cubans have lost all of that after 60 plus years of not understanding politics, not knowing real history, and not knowing about their God-given rights. It is pretty much impossible for the people to organize and create a movement to overcome the dictatorship. So I think it will take a long, long time. Now that they have some internet in some parts of Cuba, although it's very expensive, I think that has really been helping the people to open
Hmm.
their eyes and speak more about their,
Yeah.
in favor of their rights. But
Yeah.
it's gonna take a long time for sure.
Yeah, because they've been so like had the walls up for so long. I mean, we're talking about the wall in Germany, right? The communists in Germany, they put up the wall because they didn't want people getting out, right? It wasn't the Americans that put up the wall. We didn't put up the wall. It was it was the Soviets, right? The communists. And in Cuba, they've had a wall for free thinking, free thoughts. And so maybe for the first time, the wall is just starting to come down a little bit with the internet to where they have an ability that they didn't have before. And so now they're being able to maybe start communicating a little bit. Or is that right?
I hope so. Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, now you're here. So maybe if you don't mind, tell everybody a little bit more about like yourself, where you're born in Cuba and what kind of what led you to escaping and then how you became a US citizen, how you got to Utah, kind of all that.
Yeah, so I was born in the countryside in Cuba, but when I was very young, I moved to Havana. My dad, he comes from a communist family, and he was kind of like the rebel son, right? He never agreed with communism, so he was seen as a traitor to his family, and never the favorite son. They treated him very poorly. They put him in the military since he was very young. I think he even went to military daycare, stuff like that. They were very obsessed with Fidel Castro, with communism and all that. And of course, it benefited them because they got cars, houses, everything because they were communists. Um, and my
What do
dad
you
never agreed with that.
what do you mean they were communists like other people weren't, or how does that work?
So when I said they were communists, they fully and completely agree with the government and they worked with them.
Mm,
Like my grandpa, for example, he used to help the revolutionaries that instated communism in Cuba. He fought with them.
mm.
And
Oh.
then my grandma, she was like the leader of an organization that they have in each neighborhood in Cuba where she used to watch everybody what they were doing and tell them. So pretty much bad person.
Yeah.
But anyway, so my dad never agreed with that. He left the Navy. My dad was very smart, very good trained in that, but because he disagreed with it, and and he didn't want to follow the communist ideology, he deserted. He didn't want to keep doing it, and they put him in prison for a year. It was very hard. So after he finished the time in prison, he decided to find a way to leave Cuba. And it's very hard to leave Cuba. They just don't let you buy a ticket and leave, even if you say for tourism. You only can go to specific countries and have to go through a lot of filters and stuff like that. So my dad found a way to go to Germany when Germany
Mm,
used to be, socialist, that part of Germany. But once he got to Germany, my grandpa told him, and so the authorities said, hey, my grandpa told them, hey, he wants to seek asylum in Germany. So they sent him back immediately. They didn't even give him a chance
mm,
to apply for asylum. So once my dad went back to Cuba, that was really rough because he had been in prison for deserting, for being a traitor to the communist revolution. And he had tried to escape Cuba and seek asylum, which pretty much meant he was going to speak crap about the country. And so when he came back, he couldn't find a job, he couldn't do anything. We were mistreated, and we had to move to Havana, the capital. I was very young, my sister too. Once we were in Havana, we started from zero. Nobody knew him. It was easier for him to find a job.
So when he
And,
went to Germany, that was after in the 90s after the wall fell.
um, yeah, it was after. Yeah, it was definitely after because I remember it was right after my sister was born. So yeah. But once we were in Havana, in the capital, we started from zero. And the persecution didn't stop. And it was all because my dad will always speak against communism. In my mind, in my mom's mind, my sisters, we were all scared of my dad speaking up. We were always
Mm,
mad at him, saying, "Why are you trying to get us in trouble?" We couldn't even get a phone service at home because of my dad's comments during the neighborhood meetings, or everybody knew we were against the government, but while my sister and I were the kids and my mom, we all three stayed quiet, my dad would always speak up and get us into trouble. And now I understand my dad, and I feel bad that at that time we didn't support him and we didn't agree with him, because all he was doing was trying to be free he was very brave, he
hmm
was very brave to speak up. And I remember one time he was taking me to school and I saw the neighbors with pints, like buckets of paint, running, and I said, "What's going on?" And my dad said, "Act normal, relax, don't look at anybody." And when we kept walking, I saw that there was a Fidel Castro's property right by our house, and it had big walls so nobody could see what was inside. My dad had written a big sign on it, huge sign that said, "I have no education, I have no healthcare, I have no water, no electricity." And then he put like, until when, like how much longer we're gonna have of this. And all
mm,
the neighbors were painting. So of course, if they had known it was my dad, they would have arrested him right there. And there was actually one witness, somebody that was driving at night and saw him doing it, but he didn't snitch. He didn't tell my dad. But at the end, we all found out in the family that it had been him. We really needed to find a way to leave Cuba immediately because our biggest fear, especially for my mother, was that my dad was going to go to jail again for speaking up, for, being in opposition to the government. And once you get in jail, it's terrible. They torture you, especially if it's for opposition. They torture you. They can even poison you with food. They tried doing that to my dad once. And it's just physical and psychological torture. The communists are great at that. And so we first looked at Canada because we heard that Canada had a program for immigrants to come and they will help you and so and so, but we didn't have the money for that at that time. And then we were thinking about my dad coming on a raft to the US, because at that time there was a law or a policy for Cubans that if they came to the US and they were Cubans, they came to the US and were scouts, first scouts on dry land with dry feet, they could stay legally.
mm,
So many Cubans were living on rafts, just escaping the island as long as they didn't get killed by the Cuban regime while trying to escape, or killed by the sharks, or, any problems that you could have in the middle of the sea. And you made it to America and you had dry feet in dry land, you could stay legally. So,
mm.
of course, we thought of that option. But at the same time, we didn't want to break a law in this country because it was still a risk. If we were caught in water, Americans would send you back. And then it would be even worse for us as a family and for my dad, who would get arrested, who knows what else. And on top of that, safety. We actually were thinking, many people have died doing this. We don't want my dad to risk it.
Right.
So we waited a little longer, and then we found out that the Spaniard embassy in Cuba, or just Spaniard law in general, they were allowing descendants of Spaniards to become Spaniard citizens.
Mm.
So we found out that we had a great great grandfather from Spain that had came to Cuba escaping the Civil War, and he had died very, like almost as soon as he got to Cuba. And through that, we were able to become Spaniard citizens.
Oh
This
wow.
took many years because first my mom had to become a citizen, then my sister and I. And in a communist system, you have to bribe people, find
Mm.
a friend in the embassy
Yeah.
for this to work out. So it took a long time. And then finally, we were able to leave to Spain. Once we got our Spaniard passport, we were able to buy a ticket and go to Spain. And once in Spain, we of course noticed a lot of socialism. We didn't agree with it. Free enterprise is very limited.
In Spain.
Yes, in
Mm.
Spain. We did not see a future for us. We always saw for Spain was communism coming. And right now, if you look at Spain, it's gotten even worse than when we went there in
Oh, wow.
2015. Yeah, it's getting pretty bad. Um, Communism has pretty much taken over Spain right now, just so
Hmm.
you have an idea.
Really? Yeah,
So,
I actually I was in 2019, I received my mission call to go to Barcelona, Spain, and then COVID happened. And so and I got my visa and everything because of that I didn't go. And during the COVID pandemic, they were one of the most, I don't know how else to put it other than what you're saying, communistic countries. Like for 2 years, they were on lockdown, even when it made no sense. And even when people were like nobody was dying, if you even went outside, they would arrest you. Like,
yeah,
and so I was actually ended up being glad I didn't go there because if I had been there, I would have been basically living under a communistic society for 2 years. I mean, for anybody who don't think communism is a real thing, like think back to that time period of during the pandemic, like in California, they wouldn't allow you to go to church. They made laws so you couldn't go to church during that time, right? And they use these, and that's what the government does to implement socialism and communism. They use these events or tragedies or things as a context so they can come in and take more power, right? And
definitely.
so, yeah. But anyways, back to what you're saying about being in Spain and your story there.
Let me move a little bit because I have the sunshine right
Yeah,
here.
yeah, you're good.
I don't know if this is right here. That is much better. Okay, so yeah, so once in Spain, we realized that there was something wrong with it. We couldn't prosper, even though we were Spaniards. We had
Hmm.
our citizenship, but it's not a country for immigrants. It's not a country of opportunity like America. It's not a country of freedoms like America is. And once we were there, they still had the policy of drive-through wet feet law here in America. And we said, well, if we escaped Cuba or we left Cuba and we went through all that hassle, we might as well just go to the US and take advantage of the policies that we have right now. One important thing to mention, while we were in Spain, it was in the middle of the political campaign here in America in 2016 between Hillary and Donald Trump. The amount of media misinformation about America, about politics in America, and about Donald Trump is insane. Everything they put on the TV, on the newspaper everywhere, it talks bad about Donald Trump. So of course, we thought we need to go to America fast before Donald Trump eliminates the drive-through wet fee policy because he's a bad man, he's racist, and he hates immigrants. So we we found the money and we came pretty fast to America. We made it just in time because Barack Obama, right before leaving his term, he eliminated the drive-through wet feed policy.
Hmm.
So the story was different to the
Yeah.
one we lived while being in Spain. And that's something that taught me that you cannot believe everything you see on TV, even in the free world.
Yep.
And you cannot believe everything you see on social media, on newspapers. You cannot trust anything. You have to find the truth by yourself, on your own. Because even while living in freedom, you can find indoctrination, you can find misinformation, and that really changes the way you think and makes an impact in the way you vote and everything else in your life.
Yeah.
So, anyways, we made it to the US, and once at the airport, we showed that we were Cubans and said, "Welcome to America." And we cried, and we were just so grateful. It felt like we were dreaming because our final goal had always been America. We just couldn't find a way to get here safely, you know? And it was just so amazing the way they treated us as immigrants. That's why it bothers me so much when I hear immigrants complaining about the way American treats them or Americans themselves talking about how bad America is to immigrants is not true at all.
No.
America is the best country for immigrants. And they said
America,
this-
yeah,
Yeah,
sorry. No, sorry. I was just gonna say
no,
America takes in more immigrants than anyone else. And we're the nicest people to everyone else, to all the immigrants. And if Americans see an immigrant, they're not mean to them, right? Like that's not a thing. And so it's just lies by the media and propaganda that we're told. And literally, if you look at the numbers, America has the most amount of immigrants, more than any other country. It's like we have, according to the Trump administration recently, they had said 55 million people were here on visas, and then there's another 30 to 40 million illegal immigrants. So you have literally like 20 to 25% of our population are immigrants. I don't, I
yeah,
don't think people understand that. So,
no. And the thing is that immigrants choose to come to America for a reason. We can choose to go anywhere. As a Spaniard, I could have gone to Germany. I could have gone to the northern countries that they say they're so good. But I chose America for a reason because this is the country of freedom and opportunity. You cannot find that in the northern countries, Nordic countries that they say they're a socialist paradise. There's nothing like America. And that's why everybody wants to come here from everywhere in the world.
yep.
Even from Spain. Spaniards are coming to America now because it's getting so bad there. So, and it's just the amount of opportunities, even illegal immigrants have a crazy amount of opportunities here to work even illegally, get some
Yeah.
money and go back to their country, buy a house, buy a farm,
Yeah.
buy.
Yeah.
In what country you can achieve that? No, no other country.
Yeah. And even with, like you're saying, with even illegal immigrants, I mean, they can get jobs, they can get bank accounts in about a third of the states. They can even drive, even while they're here illegally, and the government
Right.
knows it. And so the amount of opportunities here it's amazing. And I really do believe it is God's promised land. And
Definitely.
so you guys get here. So kind of finishing the story, how you get to Utah. So you get here. Where did you said you
We went to
arrived?
Miami. And
Miami.
yeah, this is a funny story, but when we got there, because we came with the drive-through wet field law policy, they assigned us a social worker to take care of us. They gave us food stamps until we got our work permits that were coming in the mail. They said in a month or so. But that's what I was saying, that we were supposed to wait for the social worker to find a job for us. Um, uh, because I didn't know this, but they get money from finding a job for the immigrants. I didn't know this. Or I think it's when the immigrant gets paid, they get some portion of the payment and
Hmm.
keep it themselves, something like that. But as soon as I got my work permits, I started walking outside the streets in Miami Beach. And the first place I entered, I found a job. That's how easy it was. It was in a souvenir store. I had to clean the floor, mop the floor, clean the bathrooms, clean pee of people that came in drunk, a lot of crazy stuff. And I was so proud, and I am proud of finding that job, not knowing pretty much any English and just working hard and trying to get my money. So when I went to the social worker and I tell her, look, I already found a job, she got mad at me and she said, you should have not found a job without me. I am the one supposed to find you the job. So we're gonna have to end up your food stamps. And I said, I don't want your food stamps. I don't want anything. You can get rid of that right now. I don't need that. I am working. And I was actually pretty mean to her now that I think about it, but I was right. We're not supposed to be on welfare or on food stamps for our whole lives. You should be praised or congratulated for finding a job, for working, for going to school. This same social worker, as soon as I met her and I told her, I really want to go to school here, go to college, she said, you didn't come to America to go to college or to study, you came here to work. I was only 19 years old. And
Hmm.
that really hurt me. But the reason why I ended up in Utah is because I didn't listen to her. I worked very hard. I had three jobs. I was a piano teacher, I worked at Walgreens, and I worked at the souvenir stores. And I was able, also with the help of my parents that were immigrants like me, they had come here with no money. We didn't have money when we came here. And they worked pretty low salary works, as immigrants. My parents helped me as well, and I was able to go to college in BYU, Idaho. So this is why I believe that in America, anything is possible. Whether you speak English with an accent or not, whether you don't speak
Mm-hmm.
any English, or it doesn't matter your race, where you come from, nothing. If you want something, you can make it. You can achieve it. So I had just been here in America for 2 years in Miami, and thanks to America, I was able to achieve my dream of going to college. I went to BYU, Idaho, and that's when I met my husband. And we met in our last, in our first semester, and then we got married, and we came now to Utah because he's going to school here, to medical school. We have a beautiful family that we have made together, and I'm just living the American dream. I always say I am not rich, I am not wealthy yet. Maybe I will one day if I set that goal for myself. I know it's possible. But I live such a happy life with my beautiful family. I have everything I need. I can go out and feel free, and drive a car and go eat out if I want to, eat anything I want. I don't have anybody telling me, oh, you can only buy one piece of chicken today until next month. I
Mm-hmm.
can buy anything I want and I can do and travel and, you know, so that's the beauty of America. That even though we're not the richest people or rich at all, we can still be happy. That's the pursuit of happiness, right? That
Yeah.
we believe in.
Man, yeah, no, that's beautiful. That's the American dream, is the ability to do that and live in a way, live your life in a way that you want to, and be able to have the things that you want. And that's awesome. So how did you, um, so you go to BYU, Idaho. How did you get to know? Kind of now, I wanted to ask you a little bit more about like your faith, how that affected you, like, and when did you become a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints?
Yeah, so growing up in Cuba, we didn't have freedom of religion for a long time. I think it was from 1959 when the revolution started until 1997, the year that I was born, that the Pope came to Cuba and spoke to Fidel Castro and said, hey, it's time for the people to start celebrating Christmas at least. So that's when he started allowing some kind of freedom of religion. Um, but after 40 plus years of people not believing in anything, it's pretty hard to get the society to believe again.
So let me ask you about that before you continue. So one of the main things Fidel Castro did in the revolution 1959 was get rid of God and kind of eliminate. How did Cuba go from being right? Like was it a very like God-fearing society before the revolution? And then how did the revolution change that? And how is Cuba kind of changed religiously throughout the years?
Yeah, before communism, people were so faithful in Cuba. An example of that is my grandma that lived 20 years before the revolution. And she was very Catholic and very faithful. But after the revolution, if she continued going to church, she could lose her job. She couldn't even get back my uncle and mom baptized, all because she could lose her job. There were religious people getting persecuted in Cuba. They were put in concentration camps or labor camps, where they were tortured, where they were executed. All that for believing in God, for saying things like Christ is King, for example. So, of course, nobody wanted to celebrate Christmas. People started losing their faith. And then after the Pope came to Cuba, that's when things started to change a little bit more. But like I said, it was too late already. When you have 40 plus years, a whole generation with no religion, you ended up with people like my dad and my mom. My mom now, she believes a little bit more, but my dad, he doesn't believe in anything. He's very atheist because he came from a very communist family that taught him that God doesn't exist, that religion is the opium of the world, like Karl
Mm,
Marx said. And so, yeah, that was Cuba in that moment.
mm. So they really kind of did that. They destroyed God. The same thing that happened in the Soviet Union.
Yeah,
And I feel like people don't understand that that really is the basis for freedom. Like Christ is the foundation. Like if you look at America, why is America so free? It's because our founders were Christian, right? In fact, 9 out of 13 of so there were 13 original states that were colonies, of Britain, and in 9 of the constitutions from you had to like a claim to a Christian denomination or faith. And so those ideas were foundational in our Constitution. Like the reason, and it was based off of the idea, right? If you read the Declaration of Independence, right? The idea is that, you know, God gives all of us rights, right? And that doesn't come from government, it comes from God. And so that was what the Revolutionary War was fought about, right? It says, and this is a direct quote from the Declaration of Independence. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to separation. Right. And then he says this: we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. So it was the American Revolution was fought on the idea that, you know what? King George, he's not, our rights don't come from him. Our rights come from above. And that's really the foundation of freedom, is the understanding that God is who makes us free. And that's why America has been such a free country. It's because we were founded upon the Bible and upon biblical principles. And
Definitely.
yeah, and it seems like in the Soviet Union, what did they do? They destroyed God. They took out priests and they replaced it with communism. And the same thing in Cuba, right?
Same thing.
Instead of Christ, it was Fidel Castro.
Yep. He even changed the date of celebrating Christmas to July, in the date of some kind of revolution. Um, how do you say? They did some kind of terrorist attack during the
Mm,
revolution days, and he moved the date of Christmas to that date to kind of celebrate him and the
mm,
communists instead of Christ. So
mm,
it was like the whole meaning of Christmas was lost as well.
wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
But yeah, so anyways, we grew up with no Christmas. At the very end, some years when we had some food, we would make a dinner, in the family. But that was pretty much it. No presents, no Christmas tree, no lights outside. There was no spirit of Christmas at all. And the same with faith. In my family, the only one that had a very strong faith in God was my grandma, and she always taught me to believe in God. I think that was very important for me to, I'm not perfect, but to become who I am today, because I believe that with no faith, you cannot achieve anything in life. You cannot be truly happy. You can have a bad day, but if you have faith, you know that the next day is gonna be better, even if you live in Cuba. So my grandma's faith really helped me, and she taught me how to pray to God, how to talk to him. She said that God was always with me, always watching me and protecting me. And I believe that, and I know that's true because many times I went through dangerous situations in Cuba and I could feel that God was with me and nothing bad happened. Um, but once I left Cuba, I really wanted to get more involved in religion. I wanted to learn more about it and see if I could find a church I could join and attend church. I completely changed my life when I left. So the first thing I did, I was at the store where my mom used to work in Spain, and I saw this nun, and I said, "Hi, I really want to do some service activity. Do you ever do service activities? Can I join?" She said, "Sure." So I started attending their Catholic meetings and learning more about the Catholic religion. And then another day, that's where we met when we met the missionaries from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. They came to speak to my mom at the store, and my mom refused to talk to them because, she was tired of people from all churches coming and trying to bring her to church. But they say, "Hey, we teach English," and she said, "Well, I'm gonna send my girls to your English lessons, but don't speak anything about the church to them." We started going to the English lessons, and they never say a word about
Mm.
the church. So I was just so curious, that I couldn't wait, and I just asked them, "Hey, can you teach me more about the church? Can you let me know what you believe in?" I had, of course, done my research online, and I had seen stuff about polygamy and many negative things about the church. But I'm happy that I asked, I was courageous enough to ask the missionaries, and they started teaching me. And the rest is history. I became a member of the church. I got baptized there.
In
And
Spain?
then in Spain, yes.
Mm.
And then we came to the US, and I've just been a member ever since. I've never
Mm.
become inactive to this day because, when I don't want to press anybody to look into the church or become a member, but when I became a member of the church and when I started learning about it, I realized that that's the church I had always had to belong to. Because, for example, I never drank, I never smoked, I followed the law of chastity, I was doing everything that the church
You're
uh
living like it.
had.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Even though I was in Cuba, even though there were so many temptations going around me, I, for some reason, have faith that God was with me and watching me, and I wanted to be the best version of myself for God. So I follow all these rules in my head. Nobody told me I shouldn't do it. My parents never imposed something to me or my grandma. I just did it. And when I met the church, I realized this is where I belong. This is what I have to be. And I believe, there are many good churches that teaches great values, Christian churches. And I support that, or I like that people belong to at least one church. It doesn't have to be the church I belong to, because I think it really makes it an impact in society.
Yeah.
Um, and it's very important to find a church that aligns with your values as well. Of course, there's something always you need to change, but the good thing about America specifically is that there are so many kinds of churches and religions that you can belong to anyone that you choose and still be a good person and be good for society, and contribute. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, wow, that's really cool. You've got definitely have a unique story of, of from where you were born to overcoming to escaping communism and, and and getting to the end of it, right? Getting to Spain and then coming to America and then going to university. And so I think that's pretty cool how God's worked in your life. And so thanks for sharing that. I kind of want to just end with some of the words of one of our own prophets, Ezra Taft Benson. So I kind of talked to him a little about the beginning of the episode. So Ezra Taft Benson he was the president of the Church of Jesus Christ in the 80s to till he died in 1995, I believe. And he was one of the most outspoken prophets against communism. Like he spent a good portion of his ministry specifically against communism because, as I said, he was also the U.S. Secretary of Agriculture, the 12th U.S. Secretary of Agriculture under President Eisenhower, who was a U.S. general. And there's a book that he has called A Labor of Love. And it's about his mission to Europe after World War II. So I think one of the reasons he was so outspoken against communism is because he spent years of his life in Europe after the war. um, the church did a lot of like charity work and helped out a lot and was trying to get the church going again in Europe. And so he spent a lot of time and he saw what communism did. He saw people starving. He saw the death and the destruction that came because of communism. People don't understand that Germany was trying to regardless of whether you think they were the bad guy, they were trying to fight communism because they opposed communism. Maybe, like, I know people, hate Adolf Hitler, I get it, but the reality is they were also trying to fight another evil, which was communism. And so Ezra Taft Benson, he saw that, and he wrote several books. So I wanted to end with this. There's a talk from him from 1961. It's called "The American Heritage of Freedom: A Plan of God," and it's been one of the most impactful talks I've ever read in my life because I started, especially in 2024, I started recognizing how much socialism exists within the United States. Like, we have socialism already in many states. If you look at California, for example, they have a lot of socialism, a lot of government control over goods, over services, over things. So I'm going to share my screen, and then we're going to read a little bit of this talk, and then we can just kind of talk back and forth on what we think about it. So um, just let me share my screen here. Give me 1 second. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, so there is a quote where Ezra Taft Benson, he talked to Khrushchev, who was the leader of the Soviet Union. He said, and Khrushchev told Ezra, like, he heard Ezra Taft Benson heard this conversation. He says, "We'll keep feeding you small doses of socialism until you finally wake up and find you already have communism. We'll so weaken your economy until you'll fall like overripe fruit into our hands." And so this is what the communists were saying, was like, you guys are going to eventually have communism. And so Ezra Taft Benson, he warned people repeatedly. So here's the talk. There's a part, so we'll read where we're gonna start with this part. Never in recorded history has any movement spread its power so far and so fast as has socialistic communism in the last 3 decades. The facts are not pleasant to review. Communist leaders are jubilant in their success. They are driving freedom back on almost every front. And then I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Do you want to read this part where it says, "It is time"?
Yeah. It is time, therefore, that every American, and especially every member of the priesthood, became informed about the aims, tactics, and schemes of socialistic communism. This becomes particularly important when it is realized that communism is turning out to be the earthly image of the plan which Satan presented in the pre-existence. The whole program of socialistic communism is essentially a war against God and the plan of salvation, the very plan which we fought to uphold during the war in heaven.
What are your thoughts on that?
I totally agree with it. Even before listening to this talk and knowing about everything the prophets have said or the presidents of the church, I've I realized that. I realized that this is Satan's plans to confuse the people, to confuse the members of the church into believing that the doctrine of the church is communistic or socialistic. Um, and the difference is that, well, we believe in the law of consecration, and being charitable and giving to people and so, and being loving. Once you force others to be so and do so, you are following Satan's plan. And that's what socialism and communism aim for.
Yeah, and I think there's a big, great confusion about it because we believe in the law of consecration and what you're talking about. People think that that's communism, but it's not. Communism is using the threat of violence. I mean, the church in the early days, they tried to live the united order, which, that to live the full law of consecration, but it wasn't able to succeed because the people weren't ready for it. Right. And it's so, but that's not communism, because communism would have been if Joseph Smith had forced them all to live it at the threat of gunpoint, but he didn't do that. Right. And so it's quite a bit different. And so I just want to continue here. President David O. McKay, so he was the prophet for many years in the 50s. Um, and this is what he said. Um, he says, the fight against godless communism is a very real part of every man's duty who holds the priesthood. It is the fight against slavery, immorality, atheism, terrorism, cruelty, barbarism, deceit, and the destruction of human life through a kind of tyranny unsurpassed by anything in human history. Here is a struggle against the evil, satanical priestcraft of Lucifer. Truly, it can be called a continuation of the war in heaven. So actually, that part's from Ezra Taft Benson. But before that, David O. McKay had said, the conflict between communism and freedom is the problem of our time. It overshadows all other problems. And so I think that this is a very real thing that's going on right now, and it's happening in the United States of America. And the people are completely asleep to it. They don't see it, right? Nobody sees what's going on. I mean, it's like we were talking about at the beginning. I have seen posts from socialists here in Utah. Not only that, but when I went to the University of Utah, I had to take a course about how I had white privilege and how I had all these privileges and how white people were evil. And
Wow.
so these Marxist ideas have infiltrated our society on every level, from your education to the TV, right? It's all about dividing us into classes and gaining more control over giving the government more control, right? So, I mean, literally, Kamala Harris was her running mate was a socialist. So, and if she had she won, we would have had basically a democratic socialist in our government. You look at New York City, right? And so socialism leads the way to communism. And so if we don't fight this threat, like Ezra Taft Benson says in that talk, it's a continuation of the war in heaven. The war in heaven hasn't stopped. It's ongoing. And so my hope is that all of you can that are listening can understand that this is a very real threat. And we have Gabriela here who's actually lived through it. So that's my testimony. I know that Ezra Taft Benson was a prophet of God. No doubt in my mind, he's very prophetic in the things that he's warned about, and they're happening right now. The things that he saw, they're happening right now in our country. So what have you kind of seen going back to that threat of communism and socialism here in the United States?
Yeah, pretty much the same thing. It's just a lot of movements, pro-socialist, socialism and pro-communism. What people are being taught at schools, um, in universities, medical school, they always want to blame something on white people and make the others the victims. Children of immigrants who are being taught that because they're children of immigrants, they have less advantage in society and they cannot achieve things. When in reality, uh, actual immigrants can achieve anything they want. So why wouldn't their children be able to do so as well? There is another group that I forgot to mention at the beginning. It's called Mormons with Hope for a Better Future. I don't know if you've heard of them.
No.
They're right here in Utah. And pretty much they have a full website with scriptures from the Book of Mormon, where they're trying to change their meaning into being communists. So this is just another example, and how careful we need to be specifically with our kids, because they're the ones that are being targeted the most. Our youth, how they're being brainwashed into Marxism. And I really fear that our state and our country is going to become one day like Cuba. And I know for many people, they say, no, that's never going to happen. We have our constitution. I'm very scared about the future of America. I have brought up pictures and investigations that I have made personally about these groups to congressmen, to people here in the state, and I I am not being paying attention to. It's very frustrating. Um, I understand that maybe my opinion may sound alarming or too crazy, but it's actually not.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah, no, I think people probably think you sound crazy, but there's so much evidence. I mean, here I'm pulling up your Instagram page and right. So, and there's a lot of it here in Utah, like you said. So, but anyways, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode and learning. Um, so if you guys don't already, go follow Gabby. This is her Instagram page, Gabby underscore politics matter. So she's really helping to expose some of the things that are happening here in Utah and what we can do to fight it. Um, and just kind of sharing her experience, right, about what's going on. So thanks,
yeah,
Gabby. Yeah.
of course. No, I also wanted to mention that I speak at conferences at schools. So if anybody would like me to speak, I don't charge anything. I do it for free. So I will be happy to speak for to the youth or to any group that you have that you would like me to speak to.
Awesome. Cool. Awesome. Well, yeah, thanks again for coming on. I learned a whole lot and about Cuba and what it's like there. And so I hope that somebody listening will take some of these things to heart and hope that we can keep waking people up about what's going on here in Utah. So these ideas are infiltrating. It's the fight against communism is very real. It's very, very real. It's the fight against socialism, and socialism is really the main threat, I think, to us in the United States. And everybody's fast asleep to it. We almost, like I was saying, a socialistic presidential candidate almost won. Um, the people that are trying to push open borders and lawlessness, that is socialism, that is communism. And so, yeah, any last words before we end?
No, I just wish that people who listen today can take this matter more seriously if they haven't already. And like our prophets have taught us in other years, to search, to learn about communism, socialism, Marxism, to be aware of it and educate ourselves as much as possible so that we can defend our country and our constitution.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, that's what Ezra Taft Benson said in that talk, right? Is that it's a priesthood duty. So, thanks again, everybody. Hope you learned something, and we'll see you till
Thank you.
next time, Nauvoo Legion.